We have about
Hey, John.
22 participants, most of which will be muted with their screens disabled. And if there is any time for public comment, then I will, I can unmute you here.
Okay, we can get started. The meeting is, the full commission has asked the subcommittee to look at traffic study. And John has put together something, I guess. And we'll hear from him on what's going on.
Okay, thanks, folks. I reached out to Progressive AE, who we have worked with in the past, and they are, Pete Lamori is a professional traffic engineer. He's also a PTOE, which is a professional traffic operations engineer. We've worked with Pete on a variety of projects over the years, and he comes with, we highly recommend him. Pete and Chris from Progressive AE put together a two-part traffic proposal, which was approved by the township. Part one is the traffic generation modeling, which can be done as first phase almost immediately. I'll let Pete, he's on the line, I'll let him describe it. And part two is looking at the site primarily during the summer months, which people have, the committee has had a concern about relative to the amount of traffic on Torch River Road, plus the amount of traffic at the intersection of Torch River and Cherry in terms of traffic and intersection capacity. So that can't be done until later on, when actually the summer months, and we're recommending probably either the week before or the week after 4th of July in order to really get peak traffic volumes, turning movements. So with that, I'll ask Pete to go into a little bit more detail with the committee on what's going to be done.
Sure. Thanks for having me on today. That first phase that John mentioned is more of a trip generation analysis. We typically do that just to make sure that the second phase of this is a viable use of your time and money and all that stuff. So that's why we wanted to split this out in part. So what we use for that kind of analysis is essentially a tome by the Institute of Transportation Engineers that has done thousands of surveys on different types of land uses, and it gives us graphs to tell us generally how much traffic would be generated by proposed use. And one of those hundreds of kind of uses they have in there is an RV park / campground. So we'll be using that, primarily that resource, to define how much traffic will be generated by the proposed 80-site RVs camp. And then depending on the findings of that, you guys may or may not want us to go ahead and do the subsequent analysis based on the July data. Or you may decide you want to do that anyway, regardless, just to kind of see how that intersection is operating regardless of this proposed RV park. So that's kind of where we're at there. We should have something to you guys probably later this week already in terms of that first phase. And so that's about all I got to say right now. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
The question I have, Pete, and this is John speaking, is that if once you do the traffic generation, you will determine the number of vehicle movements in and out of the facility, and then you could add that to what the current traffic is at the intersection and on Torch River. If you did phase two, then you would add that into it to see if it causes any additional issues relative to capacity.
Yeah, that's what John's talking about is the capacity analysis, and that's essentially just a before-after analysis. Here's the conditions without the that traffic on there, and here's the conditions with that traffic on there. So it kind of gives us, that's why these are often called impact analyses or impact assessments, because it tells us what the impact of that additional traffic would have on your roads.
Does the subcommittee have any questions?
The only thing I would have is basically we're looking at trying to determine if this use is going to create excessive production of traffic. Another one thing we'd be looking at, which does it lessen the congestion on the public roads or streets? The applicant has said that it won't have any impact or actually lessen congestion. Will you be able to determine if that's true or not?
Unless it's replacing a use of higher generation, I've never heard of anything going in and lessening traffic. That'd be a new one on me. But what you might want to be prepared for is that this kind of use is likely not going to generate much traffic from the perspective of what I usually have. I mean, a lot of times we do impact studies or review them for, massive retail developments and all that. But early indications are that this kind of use might only generate about 20 trips during a peak hours, which is how we focus or look at these kind of things, is the peak hour of the day. And if that's the case, if it's 20 trips, that'd be like 10 trips inbound and 10 trips outbound. That's really not much traffic. So, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I haven't completed all the analysis and I haven't written anything up yet, but it may be something that if that's the case, I'm typically pretty blunt with clients that in most cases that wouldn't be deemed as much of an impact. And I'll give you, for instance, MDOT on its very lowest level of requiring, and they're usually thinking about wanting an impact study, their very lowest level of traffic impact assessment, that's when they require it, is 50 trips during the peak hours. So that gives you a little bit of perspective of, 20 trips in the peak hour really is well below the typical threshold for even requiring a minimum type of impact study.
Yeah, I forgot to tell you, this is Joe Marilat from the Planning Commission.
Nice to meet you, Joe.
Yeah. So there is some time factor. That's what I wondered. There must be some time factor. Instead of just trips, it's got to be trips over a certain amount of time.
Yeah. And that's
Okay.
why all these kind of studies looks at the peak hour, because you don't want to do a traffic study for 10 in the morning or 10 at night or whatever. You want to, it's a little bit different on recreational corridors, but typically you're looking at peak hours that are like in the morning peak and then the afternoon peak, the evening peak. So all these kind of studies try and look at the worst case. So if you can address issues during the worst case, then the rest of the day it'll be fine.
Okay. Does any of the other commissioner members have any questions?
So I see Chantal has her hand up. So I'll unmute her.
The question I have is regarding this traffic study is whether you are able to look at what the existing impediments are already in place, such as the shape, the curvature of the road, the roadway itself, along with parking. That's probably not something, these aren't planned parking spaces, but the way people park along the side of the roadway. Are these factors that play in your analysis?
I don't know if it's my connection or yours. I didn't catch some of
No,
that, but
that's Chantel's connection apparently.
I'll try to summarize it.
Okay.
What I think Chantel was saying. She wanted to know it in the phase 2, which is more of an on-site in the field analysis. if it includes looking at existing conditions along Torch River Road, which tend to get a lot of on-street parking due to folks that are using some of the adjacent recreational facilities.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think John and I talked about this. Yeah, John, I think we talked about this a little bit. I think that's why I said even if the trips from this proposed site isn't all that onerous, if we ended up doing the second phase, it would definitely include, being on site and looking at other issues that you might have that intersection that we can provide some, rough recommendations on how to improve that. If it's, parking in the way, you might have to indicate, I don't know what the situation is there. Maybe there's parking going on inside the roadway right of way, which is creating site distance issues. And we would have recommendations along those lines about what you can do at that intersection.
Okay. Thank you. But the original phase 1 is just more of a general model. It doesn't include all of these separate parameters. Correct?
Yeah, the phase 1 of this is just about defining what kind of trips might be generated by the proposed use.
Okay. Thank you.
Terry, do you have any questions?
Sorry, do you think there's that much difference with the type of recreational group that's there versus a town shopping area?
I'm not sure if I understood the question. Sorry.
You're talking about the situation, which this is more of a recreational area versus
Right.
a city. Do you think there's going to be that much difference in the two types?
Probably not. Yeah, probably not. Well, generally, and you guys can tell me otherwise, I would think, even though this is recreational area, I would imagine your busiest times of day are still maybe not that morning peak hour, but probably in that afternoon peak hour between like 4 and 6 p.m. So I don't expect it to be significantly different than a normal corridor. Unless you guys tell me otherwise, then from other defined or empirical data that the peak hour occurs like at 2 in the afternoon or something like that. But otherwise, we'll do the traffic counts eventually during the 2 peak periods we talked about in the proposal.
Is that it, Terry and Chantal, for any questions?
Right now.
Chris, do you have anything to add? Okay, we'll open it up to the public, the applicant to speak, ask any questions they want to.
So we received a comment from Jim and Lori Brewer. I can see you guys, so I can just request to unmute you, but you should have the function if you, if you hover over your screen. Actually, it's different from my view since I'm the host, but if you hover over, there should be like a little blue square in the top right corner with an option to raise your hand, but let me just go ahead and unmute you guys now and you'll have your time to speak. Joe, are we doing 3 minutes?
We can start with that. I don't want to have a 3-hour meeting like I had last time. I've got things to do. So if we could just speak to the point of a traffic study and keep it to that, then I have no problems with listening to that.
Okay, so Jim and Lori, there you go. And I'll start timing.
Okay, Joe, as an applicant, you passed a proposal where we were supposed to have dialogue with Beckett Rader, and we were supposed to have dialogue with engineers. we have not been allowed to, and this process you're doing right now does not allow us to have any dialogue. So, Pete, I hope you can hear me. And here's my question to you. And it was framed very poorly. Okay, we have a marina with a bunch of rack store boats here at Torch River Marine. We have roughly 63, 65 couples signed up are having boats at our marina. They drive 1 to 2 cars here every single day in the busiest days. They are all signed up for campgrounds right across the marina, and they won't be driving in here anymore. This proposal will take about 90 to 120 cars off the road in the busiest days. Yeah, it doesn't sound reasonable, but the reality is in this process, we've never been able to meet with Beckett Rader and explain what we're going to do. And we've never been able to meet with people like you and explain what's going on. And, you know, our engineers can't talk to you. We can't talk to you. This whole process is totally ridiculous.
Well, I would say, for me anyway, it'd be helpful to know that kind of information, and if that can be routed through John at Beckett Rader, I would take that under advisement with what our analysis has.
So Pete, John loses things and records things and it's gone. You know, he's supposed to open a dialogue with us and he doesn't. I don't trust John at all.
I can't help you there.
Well, excuse me, Mr. Brewer, this is John. Before I'm going to sit down and start talking with the applicant and with the applicant's engineer, I need to know all of the background and all of the deficiencies in the proposal in order to have a honest discussion. And I'm not going to do it. And I've mentioned this to the engineer. I'm not going to do it in a piecemeal, incremental basis. We're going to sit down once we have all of the data, and we're going to, at that point, with the permission of the subcommittee and the planning commission, we'll have an open exchange of dialogue. We have to do our due diligence first before we start these conversations.
Okay, I see Rebecca's hands up, so I'm gonna call on her.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rebecca Milliken here on behalf of the Torch Lake Protection Alliance and the Torch Elk Skigimog Alliance. Two citizens groups for your benefit, Pete, that have taken an interest in this project. And I recognizing that we did have a long meeting the other night, I'm hoping to speak mostly on behalf of my client groups in lieu of their individual comments. So just a couple of things I would like to touch on first as it relates to the first phase of the project, and that my comment is similar in nature but of different substance to that of the applicant, relating to the analysis of trip generation. I think it is important in this case to take a solid look at the nature of this project and how it's different than a typical RV park project. This is essentially a home away from home for people who live locally and keep their boats at the marina. And so we think that means that the RV park is not the destination, as it is in many cases with RV parks. So we expect the trip generation from the site to be something more similar to a residential area. The other thing to be aware of is that the applicant is suggesting that each of these 80 sites may have as many as 4 visitors per day, which adds additional people and traffic to the area. So that's relevant to the first phase of the proposal. And then going to the second phase, I'm glad to hear that looking at the overall context of the site as part of that second phase analysis, there are some issues that have been repeatedly raised by members of the public that specifically touch on the safety of the site. The addition of a lot of pedestrian traffic that would be expected, as well as golf cart traffic to and from the RV park and the marina, and it would be expected down into the Torch Bridge neighborhood where there are party stores and a hardware store and the like. We think it's relevant to look at the expansion of the DNR boat launch that's right nearby and how that may impact traffic as well. And the parking that we've already touched on, there's already significant issues within the RV park and along Torch River Road, excuse me. I have a video we'd be happy to share from last 4th of July that shows pretty much the entire length of Torch River Road, cars end to end on both sides of the road. And we understand that's the 4th of July, but that's sort of a peak worst case scenario, but it is a chronic problem during the summer in that area. So, you know, these concerns, we're trying to explain why sort of the standard analysis doesn't apply here. And we'd be happy to put some of these concerns in writing if that's helpful to you, Pete and John. Thank you.
That would definitely be helpful. Thank you.
All right, Mary, I see you have your hand up.
Okay, yes, my name is Mary and I live on Southwest Portland Drive. And I want to have this committee understand the traffic down at that intersection is not just confined to the summer. We passed it, and my husband and I were out for a walk, and we were down that intersection, and we walked by press, hoping he would subcommittee. There were over 65 cars on that area. And the cars by the restaurant, they have to back out of their parking space onto Perry Avenue or onto Southwest Drive. And they also park in the DNR lot across from the restaurant, which they won't Memorial.
Mary, can you speak closer to your computer?
Pardon me?
Can you speak closer to your computer? We're having a hard time hearing you.
And also, Pete, I think maybe if you can mute when you're not talking, I don't know if that's road noise, maybe.
Oh, sure.
All right. So anyway, I was saying that my husband and I were down to the intersection this past Thursday at 8:30 at night. And there were probably anywhere from 50 to 60 some cars there because the restaurant there now offers entertainment. And they were parked along the restaurant's parking areas, which unfortunately you have to back out into Southwest Torch Lake Drive. You have to back out into Perry Avenue. And then they had cars parked at the old gas station and they have to back out. And then we had people parked in the DNR parking lot and they're out in the road and it was a mess. And I sent the pictures to Chris. Chris, did you have a chance to give them to the subcommittee or not?
Yeah, we received them.
Okay. And those pictures tell the story. This is not just a summer problem. This has now become an all-year problem. When we try and pull out on out of Southwest Torch Lake Drive, we have to go to the intersection almost. People park illegally there. So this is a problem already, and adding more to it is just going to make it worse. And that's my concern. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
I don't see anyone else with their hand up at the moment.
Hey, Michelle, I think I have applicant views, so I can't raise my hand. Do you mind if I go?
Yeah.
Hi, Pete. This is Andy Blodgett. I'm the attorney for the applicant. And just a few things. I know we sent a list of questions that we would like the subcommittee to be asking today or during this process. And so I won't belabor each one of those, but a few things, mainly two, have come out today that I think really need to get keyed in by this committee. You know, we want this committee to take charge and say, this is the information we want to make a good decision here. And I would like to hear that today, especially in two ways. You know, you heard Pete say after phase one or task one, you may or may not want to do phase two. And I think the subcommittee needs to look at that long and hard. And course, from the applicant's perspective, that's because task 2 adds months and months and months to this process. And we care very deeply about that. And you've heard now one engineer, traffic engineer, has told Beckett Rader, you don't need a study for an 80-unit RV park, my words, paraphrasing. You heard this expert you're about to hire, it sounds like, say you may or may not want phase 2. And I think you need to set some parameters, at the very least, a way to discuss with this expert why or when or whether you want phase 2, how you're going to figure that out. Whether it's after he gets you the information this week or another time, what parameters you're going to use to decide whether phase 2 is warranted by this project. Somewhat related to that, as Mary just said, when I've listened to the comments about traffic at the subcommittee meetings, at the planning commission meetings, at the general township meetings, they go far beyond this project. We just heard, you know, Mary's typical, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's year-round problems, and it's the area, it's other restaurants, other venues, not this RV park. And I would like the subcommittee to ask the expert how you're going to discern an analysis of this project, which is what you've been tasked to do. When the planning commission meets, they are approving this project, how this traffic analysis relates to this project, the effects of the project, what might change about the project, as opposed to a traffic analysis of the village generally, which, as we have been saying, should be part of a master plan analysis, because this project gets either voted on yes, no, or yes with conditions. And this information you're gathering should be about this project, not about how to reduce traffic in the village overall. So again, you had my list of questions. I think the talk today just really highlighted those two issues, and we would very much be asking the subcommittee to focus on this project and to take a good look. You've been tasked with getting information. You know, I remember you saying, Joe, you're not going to do a study that isn't needed here. We'd ask to hold you to that when you're looking at this task 2 of this proposal. Thanks.
This is Brenda Hassel. I would like to speak.
Okay.
I just wanted to quickly mention just a couple of things. This is a forever decision. And so I don't think that a decision should be made based on, as far as I'm aware, there isn't a requirement that people that are going to stay in the RV park be customers of the marina. So I don't believe that there is anything to guarantee that, you know, I think Mr. Burr mentioned he has 60 or 65 people from the park or from the marina that would like to stay in the park. And that might be this year, that might be next year, but this is long after Mr. Burr might own the RV park, might not own the RV park, might be a partner in the marina and might not be a member of the marina. So I don't think it should be made upon, you know, that kind of number being thrown out, that's a guarantee. There's no guarantee. The fact is that we're saying it's basically an 80-unit stay place for people to be in the summer with the allowance of 6 guests per day per site. So I think that that does add the potential for a lot of movement in the community. And this is Torch Lake. Let's remember, it's a very sought after community for people to come and enjoy some recreation. Thank you.
Okay, if you've called in and you want to comment, you can press *9 to raise your hand, just for the couple people that just joined that called in. But if you have any more comments, please raise your hand virtually using the feature. Okay, Linda, I see you're waving. So we'll have Linda go.
Sorry about that. I couldn't access the wave hand at the bottom for some reason, but I wanted to just follow up on Attorney Blodgett's information. And this is speaking from my experience on my own, on a planning commission in Connecticut, 12 years. So I really understand what you guys are trying to deal with here. But there is, my understanding is that your master plan and your zoning requirements, similar to what we dealt with, look at whether a new project will significantly add to or require the township to make certain improvements. There's things called tipping points. And even though the traffic is congested now, you are able to and should consider that what any additional development within the township, within the village, excuse me, would add to. Is it going to require perhaps expensive traffic light, turning lanes, acquisition of property along the edges for additional lanes? Is it going to require 2 additional sheriffs during peak times? All of those things are within your zoning requirements, and I think need to be looked at. It's not just in isolation. Thank you.
This is Carrie May. Can I have a shot here?
Yep.
Okay. I'm with the engineer, with Gordy Frazier on designing the project. I just wanted to say to Pete and also John and the subcommittee members, I would hope that you would reconsider this kind of behind the fence consulting and then getting back and then having us respond. It's really been sort of unproductive to date, and I feel that, you know, we are really trying to help get you the best project, the safest project. We're concerned with all the things about a community that you are. And the difficulty when it goes this way is that information that's not necessarily correct, or more information that we could give really easily to avoid going down the wrong path, is withheld, and things are just kind of drag out and out. So, you know, we just want to have the opportunity to assist in the process to get you the information that you need. And for example, if we're going to do a traffic trip generation on the Torch River Road or the RV park, I think it's important to consider Miller Road also, because why not evaluate both at the same time, so you have all the information in front of you in case you want a different entrance, or in case you want to be creative somehow with helping the traffic that the applicant might be totally willing to do. But it makes it very difficult if we cannot get a hold of the consultant, we can't give them information, and they, you know, if they're not answering our calls or talking to us, I think it's hurtful to your process. So I would really recommend that we open that back up. We've done the independent review. I just want you to have the proper information and as much information so you can effectively do your job, rather than the way we've been going about it so far. So that's my hope. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else from the public? I don't see a virtual or a physical hand raised. So I think that's all the comments.
Question I had was which portion of this study would give us the extra traffic generated by the RV park? Is that phase
That's
one?
the first phase. The first phase, yes.
And that is projected?
Yes, that's and it sounds like there might be some other ancillary information that'd be helpful to have. But yeah, that's all we're looking at on this first phase is just defining how much traffic is expected. The proposed project is expected to generate during the peak hours.
The second phase would you could take into consideration whether there should be an entrance exit off Miller Road or a deceleration turn lane from River Road into the RV park and things like that.
Yes.
Okay, is there any other comments from the planning commission members? None. The criteria we have under site plan review is, quote, there is a proper relationship between the existing streets and highways within the vicinity and proposed deceleration lanes, service drives, entrance and exit driveways, and parking areas to assure the safety and convenience of pedestrian and vehicular traffic. That's one of our criterias. Under a special use permit, we have a criteria that says that there will not be a generation of excessive production of traffic. And under another site plan, one of the purposes of it is to lessen congestion on public roads and streets. So that's what the planning commission is looking at. Are you going to be able to tell us whether there's excessive traffic?
That's a slippery slope on what's excessive traffic. It's, excessive traffic, I guess, would be defined about how its impacts on the road are. If the traffic that's generated by any proposed use makes an intersection function much more poorly than it did before, then that might be an excessive impact. The second phase of this would define more what those actual impacts are to the streets, right, or that intersection there just north of the site.
This just a process question from Chris, for Chris. The first part, this subcommittee didn't make any determination on whether we were going to do a traffic or a study. The board actually approved that. So is it your understanding now that the planning commission wants the three of us to decide how far to go with this traffic study and spend money? Unmute yourself.
Are you asking me that question?
No, this is Chris. I'm sorry. Pete, I don't have any questions for you right now. This is a process question for Chris Weinsappel.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So the board made money available to go forward with however the subcommittee feels. And it's like they were saying, we can go ahead with the first, if that's adequate enough to go on to the second, but at least have them take the first step. But that's totally up to the subcommittee.
Yeah, where I read, my understanding was before that this subcommittee did not make those kind of determinations on whether to do the first study. The first study was, my understanding, the board made that decision, not even the planning commission. So I couldn't find anywhere where the planning commission made that determination. So.
Joe, may I speak to that?
Sure.
I was at the board meeting. I asked the board specifically, they made clear that the money was available if the planning commission or subcommittee wanted to do it. They put no guidance on whether phase one, phase two, any of the proposal needed to be done.
And the planning commission at their last meeting punted to us. Basically, they wouldn't determine whether they wanted a traffic study or not. They're just asking us to do it. So
let me weigh in here with the planning committee. Pete had mentioned it, and I had mentioned to the subcommittee at the last meeting that when I had spoke to a traffic engineer in the Traverse City area about the trip generation portion of this, they indicated that typically an RV park doesn't generate a significant number of trip ends. And Pete's kind of confirmed that. The real issue here, though, based on questions from the community, the public, and the subcommittee, is if you add that additional traffic onto that system, onto Torch River Road and that intersection, is that incremental increase going to cause additional issues that need to be resolved as part of this project? And you're not going to get that answer unless you do the phase 2.
That's where I was going too, was phase 1. The applicant has actually gave us some information on the trip generation.
Right.
And without phase 2, we don't have any more information than we have now, basically.
Correct. Because if you read through the minutes, and Chris has provided me all of the minutes from the previous meetings, the public had concerns about what happens with this project in relationship to what happens on Torch River Road, especially during the summer, with all of the parking and the additional traffic and the pedestrian movement. The trip generation study, part 1, is not going to address that. Part 2 will.
The other thing I had was, we don't do a study in Elk Rapids during Harbor Days or Traverse City during Cherry Festival, because nobody would ever get anything done, because it's always going to be excessive traffic during those times. So I'm not sure what time of the year, specifically whenever they do the fireworks down at the bridge, that is not the time to be doing that. That's the time that the sheriff sets up a separate place at the fire hall, and they've, all kinds of things are going on. It's very difficult to get through there, but at some other point in the summer would be the better time.
The planning commission members that are familiar with kind of like the general operation of the network in the village need to instruct us, and specifically Pete, when the appropriate time is to do that on-site analysis. So you're not doing it when you have a festival, which is unusual. You want it to be representative of normal operating conditions in the summer. So it could be in June, it could be in August. You folks know when that is. You need to tell us. That's when Pete would do the on-site part of the phase 2 study.
Okay. Chantel, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I think I want to add is what I mentioned at the last commission meeting, was that we were tasked with looking at traffic as one of the tasks that needed to be sorted out and better understood. So I have been very, forthright in thinking that's important. And I agree that this phase 1 type of study is probably not worth our money. We probably just need to look at the very specific situation that we have here, figure out what the right time of the year, the summer is to do that, and move forward, get this going.
The phase 2 requires it to be, because it's an actual on-site thing, or it's not some projected study. Just trying to understand the phase 2 part of it.
I can help with that if you want some further description. What we do if you guys have us do the phase 2, we go up and do actual what's called turning movement counts. So at that intersection, we count the through movements, the turning movements, and all that for 2 different sets of 2-hour peak hours. And within that, we find the worst case, the peak hour. And then we do an analysis of that, capacity analysis, using standard software. It's recognized nationally. And then we would place what we feel is like the likely distribution of the site's traffic on that. And then we redo the capacity analysis to define the impact of that additional traffic on the intersection. So that's the basic part of that. And then the upshot of that, whether we find that the proposed development impacts the intersection much or not, we would provide recommendations as to improvements that could or should be made at that intersection make it function better, whether or not it's the result of the proposed development or just the existing traffic out there.
Okay. So where do we go from here, Chris? Do we need some kind of a agreement among the planning commission members? I don't think we want to do phase one and then meet again in 2 or 3 weeks and belabor this and go on to phase two. If we're going to do a traffic study, we need to just do a traffic study and get this thing going.
Hey, Matt, you have any comments?
My comments would echo the chair's concerns, and it would seem like a traffic study should be conducted as quickly as possible so this matter can move along. And it would seem that it is not over the July 4th weekend. It's not over the holidays. It is what would be standard, whatever the subset is for generally a day in the life of the area. So I think that the subcommittee's task would be is traffic, and it would be perhaps securing the date, allowing the applicant and allowing Ms. Milliken to provide some additional documentation through their engineers, et cetera, meeting with Beckett and Rader, and coming up with a date specific for the traffic study to be performed.
And we could provide some input on that as well. Obviously, you guys have the local knowledge. There are certain parameters, for instance, that MDOT and other county roadway agencies make us go through or recognize it more readily. In terms of trying to make this more expeditious, and I understand that, I would suggest that something in mid-June would be probably more average than that, because I think you would set yourself up for other issues if you had us do the traffic counts, a week on either side of 4th of July and that kind of thing.
Okay, Rebecca has her hand up.
Okay.
Sure. I just real briefly wanted to touch on the idea. It sounds like there's some question of whether the phase one should be skipped, but I think earlier in the conversation, Pete was telling us there were some kind of site or project specific parameters that might be appropriate to put in place even for the phase one part of the process. And because the phase two part of the study incorporates phase one information, I think it's important that we don't skip over that step. And my understanding is it sounds like the phase one is something that could be accomplished in relatively short order and wouldn't actually slow down any part of the overall completion of the analysis. And so we would just urge that the study be complete in the way that it has been recommended by Pete and John.
Yeah, you have to do both parts. If you skipped number one, which is the trip generation modeling, and just did phase two is only going to tell you what the existing conditions are. It's not going to tell you how the existing conditions are going to change with the added amount of traffic from the RV park. So you have to do both of them. And my suggestion is that you probably don't want to do it the week before the 4th. The 4th is on a Sunday, which would be the week of June 8th or June 28th. And you don't want it to do the week after the 4th. But my suggestion would be you want it to get as close to summer conditions as possible. So if you don't want to do it the week before the 4th, you would start the process on the week of June 21st. Or what are you going to say? Or you'd start at the week of July 12th.
What did he say? Don't piss them off too much more, dear. They're doing what we want. I just.
My suggestion is you do the study either the week of June 21st or you'd start to study the week of July 12th. That way you're on either side of the 4th of July.
So
Yeah.
who's going to make that decision? The subcommittee? Is that, we have to choose the date, or do we go back to the, I mean,
I think
don't-
the subcommittee can give some parameters. I don't know that the subcommittee knows exactly. Didn't Pete say that they would give some input on that too?
yes.
Joe, may I make one small comment?
Sure.
We have, everybody knows there's a few hundred people who don't like this project. Could I recommend that the exact date and time of when someone will be out there with a counter not be made known? So we don't have a spontaneous parade, if you catch my drift.
Yeah. Yeah, so my suggestion would be phase 2 should take into those two things that I mentioned before is you're looking at River Road specifically, but if this actually had an entrance exit or an entrance from River Road and an exit on Miller Road, you know, how that would impact the situation. And if there seems to be a problem where the vehicles would turn into the RV park, whether a turn lane there would make sense or be recommended, I guess, is what would be asking.
Looks like Rebecca has a response.
Yeah, up until this point, I think Miller Road has only been discussed as a potential fire exit, not as a.
That's correct, but they do abut Miller Road.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just suggesting if we're going to throw that into the mix, then it's appropriate to also assess the safety of an entrance or exit on Miller Road because of the topography there and the blind curve and so forth. So that's a whole new set of sort of special circumstances that should be taken into account if that's part of the analysis.
Okay. Does anybody have any as far as Chantel and Terry? You agree we should go forward with a phase 1 and phase 2, or just phase 1 and then decide on phase 2, or how do you want to proceed?
I mean, can we not proceed with at least planning for both of them? And if there's something that clearly is obvious in phase 1, but at least we've got this on the consultant's time frame, you know, in their schedule, and if we need to pull back on it, we can, but otherwise try to get them both scheduled.
I'd say if it's something that we're going to do, let's get it done. Sooner the better.
Well, it sounds like the soonest would be in June. So
And most of the RVs, I think, would be there at this time of year if they were coming in. And most of the residents would be there.
it'd be after Memorial Day and prior to Labor Day, certainly. So do you have anything else to add, Chris?
No, I don't at this time.
Okay.
But I'd like to go ahead and get it tentatively, at least let's have it scheduled and go from there.
Are you going to oversee the actual
June,
schedule?
June 21st, was it, John?
Yeah, Chris, June 21st is probably outside of the parameters of the weekend of the 4th. So,
yeah. So I think, like Terry said, I mean, school's going to be out. There's going to be movement and everything. So I think we'd get a halfway decent assessment of the traffic going through there.
Okay. I think we'll go ahead with phase 1 and phase 2 at this point. And we have got one or two, we're gonna have 2 planning commission meetings in between there. But anyway, this committee should plan on meeting sometime in July.
I can schedule anything at the last minute. Alls I need with scheduling this subcommittee, alls I would require is a minimum of an 18-hour notice, number one. And then time frame for Michelle, that you and I hook up pretty quick and you could schedule that Zoom meeting pretty quick, could you not, Michelle?
Yep.
So however things move along, if we have to do something at the last minute, if something comes up out of that, actually out of the first report that, you know, there's a definitive that they feel no further traffic assessment would be needed, we can call a quick meeting and go from there. Other than that, if it looks like one is required, we'll have it already scheduled, move forward.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Pete, do you have any other further comments and what's your thoughts on that?
Pete, you're muted.
John and Matt, any further comments on that?
No, I'm fine. Pete's traveling, so he may be
Yeah,
in the
okay.
area.
Okay.
I don't have any further comments.
Okay, yeah, this is Pete. I think that sounds like a good game plan. I'm up for it.
Okay.
Hey, Pete, do you have a time frame on that part one? Because if I thought he said he'd have something done by the end of the week on that part one part. I don't know. Maybe I misunderstood.
No, that's, if you can hear me now.
Yep.
Yeah, we can, the phase 1 part of this. Well, the only qualifier on that, I've heard some different sources of input today about that might influence the trip generation part. I guess I would need, if I can get those in the next day, I could still, you know, email to John or directly to me. I can use those and still get some out by the end of the week. If I don't get that stuff till, you know, towards the end of the week, it's probably early next week.
And that would, Pete, that would sound okay too, if we even have to get it in next week, at least we have some kind of time frame.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.